So don't put your finger up your nose and don't swear. Especially in that order. So it tells us that we're streaming live, but I can't see it yet. So we'll wait until somebody says, yes, I can see you. And then we know that we are...
I can see you, Bob.
Can you? Oh, right. Behave yourself. Oh, there we go. And we are indeed live. I'll need to expand that and then hit this, stop the sound. There we go. So we're live on Facebook. We'll wait for somebody to just pop in and say hello, and then we know that it is actually live and not just a figment of my imagination. Yes, excellent. We have some people there. So good afternoon all. Good afternoon, collected panel here. I'm sure everybody knows who everybody on here is, hopefully. But just in case, if I go around in the order that you're shown on my screen, which is actually different to the order it's shown on there, but let's go ladies first. Nikki, tell everybody who you are.
I'm Nikki Harris, and I'm an instructor trainer and run a multicast driving school in Yorkshire.
Splendid. James, you're next on my screen.
Oh, well, I'm not on my screen, but I'm James Conley. I run a franchise business across the UK, and we also do some driving instructor training. I've been in driving instructor now for about 15 years, so you know, quite a time now for me.
Excellent. Chris, you're next on mine.
Chris Lemstead. I run Facebook groups, driving instructors. I've got my own driving school and franchisees, and recently founded the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective.
Splendid. Mr. Harrington Lunt.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Sean Harrington Lunt, based in Andover, Hampshire, and I run a multi-car school and an audit training registered company in the Southwest.
My name is Bob Morton, Director of Training at the Learner Driving Centres, one of the UK's larger driving schools. Retiring this year. Oh, how old am I? So, welcome to everybody, and hello to everybody who's watching, either live or after the event, because we're going to share this. I've just remembered to press record. Duh, nearly missed it. So this will get shared around the various other groups. I thought it was a worthwhile thing to bring together people who I know will have opinions and who are well regarded in the industry and who don't partake of some of the silliness that we see elsewhere. To have a chat about, well, what is it all? I mean, it's fairly current, isn't it? Because it's been in the news, shall we say, franchising, and we all have a vested interest in franchising in some way, shape, or form. So we were chatting just before we came on and saying that, you know, maybe it's worthwhile asking the first question, which is, franchises, are they the work of Satan or your friend in the business? But then, of course, we chatted that back and forth a little bit, and you know, well, what is a franchise? What is it meant to be? So that suddenly became a fairly interesting topic between us all, because there's different types of franchising. It seems they should all be the same thing. You know, the franchisor says, I've got this thing and I want to have other people be able to have this thing to do whatever it is that you do with that thing. And so it's a method, if you like, of operating a business that has certain parameters attached to it. Is driving school franchising that, or is it not? I mean, what do you reckon, boys and girls? It's interesting.
I would say to that, you know, what's the difference between a driving school franchise and McDonald's? In many respects, they're one of the same. You know, we supply obviously potentially the cars. They supply, well, they don't even supply the building. You lease the building and yourselves. They help you find the building. We supply the products, which are the pupils. They supply the food. There's a lot of parallels. I mean, it is a franchise. You know, some of the driving schools, AA, I won't mention that, BSM, have big reputations, been around a long, long time. And pupils go to that school because of that reputation, and the instructors then benefit from being within that franchise. So for me, it's a franchise model.
I mean,
although you're not actually buying into the business, are you, like McDonald's, where they're buying into it?
Well, they're not directly buying into it. I mean, they're buying they're not even buying a share. I mean, they're buying the right to operate in a certain area, which I know, you know, with driving schools, there's very few schools that will give exclusivity. But then, I've got my doubts about some of the Subway stores. These things are open everywhere, so perhaps they don't give exclusivity either. But other than that, I still believe it's a franchise model.
There's a really interesting, I think it's Netflix, but it could be Amazon Prime. What's it called? The Founder, I think it's called.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't use that example.
That's an interesting watch, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Because it turns out that McDonald's, at that stage of their development, they really truly were the Antichrist, and monstrously restrictive practices. So I think it gets morphed into a friendlier kind of thing. The smaller it gets.
Do you think that maybe they're not seen as franchises, particularly because there are some very small schools out there with maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 cars, so they're not ran perhaps in the same professional way that a bigger school might be, and maybe that's why they're seen differently.
Well, it could be, because the people who run them tend to think of them as, I had a school that had 4 cars. So I didn't think of myself as a franchise. I thought myself as a 4-car driving school. So it's interesting. We had to look at this at LDC early on, because we based ourselves on the old BSM model, which was, you come along and you give us a big lump of money and we'll give you the car and the pupils, and you go away and you do the lessons and we'll do everything else. And it's great, except that you start to realize you lose a lot of people every year.
Yeah.
So we wanted people to stay with us. So we decided, maybe we could tighten the contract up. The only way we were going to get people to stay was to give them more of what they wanted. So what we did was, we talked to people who were leaving and said, well, what are you getting that you haven't got? And it was their own name on the car. They wanted to choose what kind of car they had. They wanted to control their own diary. They wanted to feel like they were independent. And that's the way that we look at it at LDC, that they're independents just under this framework, and they've got a great deal of say in what happens. And, we ask them about stuff. Like, for example, this lockdown thing, when it became obvious it was going to be a long gig, we talked to them. I speak to the boys and girls every Monday morning, and we talk to them and said, well, what do you think? What would be a fair way of going about it? And I think that's the mistake that perhaps the AA made, that, instead of discussing it with their boys and girls, the head chief at their place went on Twitter and started lambasting them all. That wasn't a smart move, was it?
No.
It was a PR issue, not a decision issue necessarily. A decision had to be made. For me, franchises, especially inside of our industry, they're like fast food, aren't they? You get the really good, you get the not so good, and you get the ones that you're going to be violently sick after. And they leave a really bad taste in your mouth for a long time. And I think that, it works that way. And the problem is 99% of the time, the people on both sides of the equation haven't laid it out properly, haven't read the contract, and have signed and agreed before, realizing what's going to happen, because they didn't predict a, global pandemic like, everyone should have done.
Who knew?
And actually, if we hindsight's awesome, but if we can come up with a fair contract, you can very overtly say, this is it, this is what's going to happen, which, Ian, Brett, my business partner, and myself, that's what we had an issue with. I was with a national driving school. He was with a local driving school. We then set up independently, but we then realized what we were missing from the group, the community feel and everything else. And we then sat down and went, as an instructor, what do we want? Yeah. As an instructor, what would that franchise look like? And we made it. That's how we started. And then others came along and went, you know what, I'm looking for something that hasn't got the restrictions, that if I need to, next week I can leave. So, we officially, they can leave after 2 weeks, but actually often it's 1. Yeah. As long as the pupils are being looked after, we're all happy. So
as long as nobody damages anybody else's reputation. I mean, I do the induction process at LDC, and I talk to the boys and girls when they come on board about it's a relationship we're forming with you here. And as with any relationship, it's about expectations. If if your expectations are not met, you're going to be happy. And the classic example of that is when you first live with somebody. You know, I've just moved in with my girlfriend, and it's lovely here, but you know, we're now going to have to negotiate the stuff about where the
this is being recorded.
It is.
You just said but.
Bugger. But you've got that negotiation about, you know, leaving drawers open, which is my thing. Where does the toothpaste get squeezed? And these little things become huge if they're not negotiated, if we don't talk about these things. Communication is the key to everything, isn't it? And it's, and again, the PR disaster that the AA had was because of a lack of communication.
Yeah.
You know, I always liken it to being at the airport and your flight being delayed. If they just leave you, you get angry real quick. But if they come and give you a little voucher, all they're giving you is a free cup of tea and a biscuit, but you're as happy as a pig and you know what then, aren't you? All right, I know what's happening. So it's similar here. What's your two penneth on the franchising end of things, Sean?
Well, I'd just like to rewind a few steps and how do people become involved in franchise. So if you have a look where the journey really begins, it really starts off in the training steps, doesn't it? So Fred Bloggs or Mary Bobbins, whoever signs up to do some training. And then during that training process or during that contract, that's where the scrupulous can be embedded in, isn't it? So when a person first decides, I think I'll become a driving instructor today, you know, and obviously on Google or whatever, and we know immediately on Google, we get the big six there immediately, you know, and a couple of other ones. So they buy into that. They hand over, you know, the funds, do the training. And the logical step from the training for most is then to be involved in as joining onto the franchise. Depending on which franchise model you work or operate, it depends, you know, on the length of contract for that franchisee in that relationship with the franchisor. So it's at that stage, isn't it? What does the franchisor offer? Does the franchisor offer a 2-year tie-in contract? And that's my gripe about the franchises. You know, little Mary Bobbins or, you know, Joe Bloggs doesn't know, none the wiser. They don't know what they're going to do, what the training to become a driving instructor really involves. But yet, it's at that stage where they pay for the course, sign up to the training, and they're potentially stuck into a 2-year contract, potentially 12-month contract. So it's that step, isn't it, really? That's the niggling point. Now, what a lot of people don't realise, that the people who generally hate franchises, and we see it on Facebook quite a lot, you know, is that from a business model point of view, a franchisee may only stay with the franchisor for a certain lifespan, may only have 2 years. And then that franchisee may then go off and decide to become independent. But then the life cycle's got to go round again. We've then got to bring in another trainee franchisee. But we've got to look at the good that a lot of these good franchisors, I know, you know, everybody on my screen here operates a really good franchise, but we've also got to look at the good that we offer as well. You know, so for example, you know, the risks versus benefits. So the franchisee is already going to be offered an already done for you service, really, aren't they? You know, so they're joining an established business, and they're going to be tapping into that without, you know, hitting the ground running. So they don't have to have any much business acumen. From a business perspective, from a risk as well, it's more or less likely to fail. So again, that's going to benefit the franchisee. So that's another benefit. They're joining a business model that works, really, aren't they? It's got recognised brand name, for example. You know, very little business knowledge in business is actually needed, but they can gain their business whilst in that franchise, and that's what they do. Then they go off after a year, 2 years, whatever, really. You know, but from the franchisor, we invest so much time, effort, and sometimes financially as well. We invest that money back into the business because, from a franchisor point of view, we want our members of our team to be brilliant, you know. So therefore we do offer them other incentives, such as business management, such as a training program. So there's lots of gains, you know. There are pros and cons, aren't there? You know, from a franchisor point of view, one of the risks could be that franchisee gives us a bad reputation. So now we've got to go on a PR recovery exercise, you know, disaster plan and stuff like that. So the scales there are evenly balanced, really, aren't they? But you know, some say it's horses for courses, but I don't want to use that terminology. We've got to look at the industry and what franchisors offer the industry and all of the good that we do. And it may be only a short life cycle. Oh, let's put my vodka back in here.
That's all that rushing around, Sean.
Yeah, we may only have a short life cycle with a franchisee, but we do have our worth within the industry because we provide the training, provide the support, and a host of lots of other different things as well.
Well, there's an argument to be had there, isn't there, to say that, you know, franchising, because they're teaching people how to do the job right and how to be professional, generally that raises the standard of the industry. You know, we find sometimes that people leave because they don't want to be held to account. They don't want to be, you know, pulled when they've been messing pupils around or they've done things they shouldn't have done. And we find that people will leave just to not be checked upon. And, you know, their ethics are perhaps not as good as they could be. You know, and I think your ethics should be, you know, that's the way you behave when nobody's watching. That's what your ethics are.
So are we touching there on, just to check I understood correctly, are we touching on the potential that there could also be not just bad franchise providers, but bad franchisees?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
you know,
and I think that's something that, you know, is rarely talked about, isn't it? That not every instructor is right for a franchise.
I think we're qualified to talk about it because it's the faces on the screen that end up tidying the mess up that they leave.
Yeah.
And sometimes that mess is considerable, but it is, you know, and it's, if you look at even, let's say that the franchise that's not being painted in a good light at the minute by a lot of people, the AA. If you're brand new in this industry and you've come from being employed all your life, that's the perfect package to start with. You've got nothing to think about. Here's a car, here's a diary, go and do those lessons. It's spot on. Later on, when you're able to generate more of your own work through word of mouth, which you should do if you're doing a good job and stuff, maybe you don't need the full package. And, you know, the AA are also realizing that they've got to offer different types of packages. For the sort of the medium-sized franchises, where you've got to find a happy medium, too many mediums in that sentence, to try and offer good value, but still give a package where people want to stay. And interestingly enough, the easier we make it for people to leave, the less likely they seem to do so, which seems counterintuitive, really.
I know we've already touched on it, but don't franchises, we essentially bring people into the business. If it wasn't for us, there'd be very, very few people coming into the industry at all. And that would create a completely different kind of mess.
It would just be school of mum and dad, and would the pass rate go up then?
Yeah.
I don't know
if that's necessarily true, because, you know, there's been other countries where it's not regulated, and it's a bit like when people come into this country and they don't speak English. A lot of the time they'll end up being something like a hairdresser. It's a skill that they can use. It doesn't require the language. You know, there's that kind of thing. So with the, you know, being an instructor, language is important unless you're inside of a community where you know everyone speaks a common language anyway. But I think it's a natural progression. It's a job this is why we see such a wide range of people from different backgrounds coming into the role, that it attracts people because they've got a driving license. And I think actually that's where the problem is. It's possibly too easy. And if we look at the difficulties with the franchise models, the industry on a whole, you know, a lot of the reason for, I don't want to say blame, but the reason for some of those challenges that we face sits with the qualification process. The way that the big training providers work, what they offer sits with the qualification process. And some of the reason that, you know, Sean's point about the the length of the exit requirements or the contract requirements, it's because the school will tell you, the training provider will tell you that they need that to make money, because actually they're making a loss on the training being delivered. But that training being delivered, it will then, if they charged more for it, they could deliver the training and people could make a better choice potentially, because there would be other opportunities. So I think, sometimes we're victim of our environment, aren't we? If I wanted to set up a totally new thing, and we tried to do something different, everybody will compare you to what they know. And they'll be, but that's a franchise, and it's, we tried to call it a business support payment. We don't provide pupils. We help them develop their own. It's that if you give them fish, they can eat for a week. If you teach them how to fish, it's
and the rest of their life on board with a six pack. Yeah. It's true. It's true. I mean, if we invest that time and effort into making them not independent, giving them the skills they need to be able to be independent, we've got to be able to offer them something else. And Sean touched on it before about CPD. People want to feel part of something special as well, I think. So there's that side of it. And Nikki, I know you do a lot of that with your guys, don't you?
Well, I think a lot of what you get from a franchise is that being part of a team. Because at the end of the day, being a driving instructor is a lonely job, even though we're always with people. So I think, whether you're new into the industry or you've been in it for a while, if you feel as though you belong and you feel valued and appreciated, and it's and made to feel, that you are part of a team where you're all supporting each other, that's my ethos for it. So that you've always got someone to turn to, because that's the hard thing, isn't it? When you go on your own, if you go independent, you haven't necessarily got someone that you can just run something by. So it's looking at, I think Sean does this as well. It's looking at more of it as a partnership, isn't it, with your instructors. But again, it's getting to them, as you said, Chris. The training from some of the organisations is so far lacking in terms of what it's providing, and it is all test focused rather than being actually on becoming an instructor.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Nikki. One thing that I would like to add on to that, or follow on from that, sorry, but it really brushes against what Chris has already said as well, is we know with a lot of franchisees, when they join a franchise, they'll be thinking about an exit strategy. My prediction, I'm going to predict something here. I've got a crystal ball, but I'm going to predict something here.
It was Sean.
I know, yeah, like do.
It's why he walks the way he does.
Hold on a minute, I've got to put my hat on. So what I'm going to predict is that the industry is going to get worse in probably around about 2 years' time. The quality is going to drop, and there's going to be more frustration, and the reputation of an ADI will be tarnished slightly. And the way I'm going to justify that is because I'm just going to do a forecast analysis. So at the moment, I've mentioned that, and you can try this exercise yourself. At some point, just Google train to become a driving instructor, and you will see My Four Wheels, you will see AA, you will see BSM, you will see Red, and a couple of others. I don't like naming, but whilst we're on the subject. And some of them are charging something ridiculous. Train to become a driving instructor with us, £799 plus money back guarantee. If you don't believe me, Google it. Right. So, as Chris said, companies that are offering those offers, they're running at a loss. There's no way you can make a profit to train somebody to become a driving instructor for £799 and money back guarantee. So therefore, you've got to keep them on a franchise. And as I said at the very beginning of the journey of a PDI, they'll sign with one of the big popular names, be tied in, and because they're charging so cheap, they're heavily marketing, and they're being quite successful. So what's happening in the background at the moment is people are coming on board to train to become driving instructors. And it's going to be a massive influx. So at the moment, we're all discussing, as driving instructors, let's put our prices up. In 2 years' time, there's going to be so many instructors out there, that the market will be forced to potentially put the prices down. And with the franchisees will want to exercise their exit strategy, but earlier than what they would wish to, or earlier than what the franchisor would want them to wish to. But they can't, because the franchisor has got them locked in. So something's got to change. Number one, certainly look at the price, the price-driven motives. It's not all about making money, but the more money people focus on making, the quality is going to be diluted, and the end game will be the market will be saturated, and it'll be
Well, I think it's also going to be
low prices down.
Yeah, something else that's going to feed into that dialogue, of course, is that we're about to enter a time of plenty, aren't we? We're going to be overrun with work, and it's not going to be hard to generate work. So the people whose ethics are perhaps not quite as good as they could be are going to really relax on that, because they can. They can afford to upset people, they can afford to mess people around, because there's going to be tons more. So that's going to create real demand for driving instruction, which will allow companies to say, look at this, look how much money you can earn, there's tons here, and we're going to have an influx. So I think you're quite right, Sean. In a couple of years, maybe 3 years' time, we're going to end up where we were when I first joined the industry, which was after all the miners became redundant and spent their money on driving instructor training courses, and the market was saturated with training license holders. Then everybody was cutting each other's throats. And because it was it has that impact. It is in those cycles. I think the watchword, it's buyer beware. And just as Alan said, I'm just trying to keep an eye on it. I see you're answering some of the questions, guys, as well, which is good. We're trying to get that balance right. We ask our guys, give us 30 days notice and we can walk away. There's no penalties, there's no restrictive practices. They're not our pupils, they're your pupils. And we very much look at it. And I think to get it right, and I think we're all doing that, is we see the pupils as the franchisee's customer, and the franchisee is our customer.
Yeah.
And if we all take care of our customers, then we'll be all right. And we've had a sort of an approach with our guys, because some of the guys have had help from the government and some haven't. So with our guys, the guys who've got nothing from the government, then they're not paying anything. The ones who can afford to pay are paying a lot less than they were before. Because we asked them, if you still want the company to be there at the end of the day, there's this building to pay for and there's all these cars to pay for. We can't just let that run, otherwise it'll not be there when you come back. So it's that expectation thing again. But I mean, the answer would be for us to be more professional as an industry and be more open and transparent on these guarantees, which are crazy. It's not tenable. So it's all buyer beware. Read the blooming contract. We put all ours in writing and we go through it with them and say, this is what you're signing up to. This is what it means. This is what happens if you cancel your training. This is what happens if we can't make it. This is what happens when you're qualified. You don't have to take this work. This is what we expect of you. What is it you expect of us? So we're asking them the questions. And I think that's key as well. Whether you're a franchisor or whether you're just a one-man band, you need to be asking your customers, what is it you expect of me? Let's have this contract. Let's have this bargain that's struck between us. And, and then, if we need to step away from it, we negotiate that. That's what it's about. And it's, as with all human conditions, But this sort of leads into just looking at the questions that are back and forward here. The thing I see on Facebook all the time is, I went independent. It's the best thing I ever did. And occasionally I'll engage with these people. So, where you got now, you didn't have then. And what transpires is they've left, I've saved my franchise fees. Oh, brilliant. So you're making more money. Oh, no, because the first thing they do is put the prices down. What have you done that for? Well, I've got a franchise to pay. So you've left the franchise, you're no better off. Why have you done that? Then what we get is them defending that position really vehemently because they feel that they've got to now. If you want to be an independent, it's fine. That doesn't mean, that you've got to convince everybody else to do the same, and that, and that vomiting on somebody else's eider down isn't the right thing to do. You can't get happy by making other people unhappy. I'll be glad for you if you've got independent. Well done, you. I'm blooming delighted for you. Just get on with it and shut up. Sorry, that
can I, Bob? Can I throw the opposite? You know, I think we're problem is we're all quite pro-franchise.
Of course.
And I think it's probably important to say that it's not easy.
No.
And it's not right for everybody, because what I'm seeing at the moment are people that are, because they've got a full diary, who hasn't, it depends how long it's going to last, but because they've got a full diary, I need to get another instructor or other instructors. And either I need to start training PDIs or I need to start taking on ADIs.
Yeah.
And I think that actually causes us problems, because you're potentially lowering the quality of training. It's not to say they're not a good instructor, but that doesn't make them a good trainer. For PDIs, it's a different game, and we know that it's a very different thing. And it also doesn't mean that they're going to be good at being a franchisor. They might be the best franchisee going and best instructor going, but it's, again, a different set of skills potentially in there. So I just think, with us all being, yay, the franchise, as long as we do it the right way, watch out for those that aren't. Don't become one that isn't, and don't feel you have to be the top of that tree. There is nothing wrong. My guys will all, I will trust them with a lot of things, and they're really good instructors. I don't think any of them want to run their own school, and I respect that. Some days I don't know if I do.
We take the same line with our guys. They pay a basic franchise fee, and then they buy bolt-ons, if you like, for things that they can't do themselves or don't want to do themselves. Some people don't want to answer the phone when they get home. Some people do. It's some people have got a lot of expertise in IT. Some people don't. So it's horses for courses, isn't it? And it's and there are some independents out there that are exceptionally good. But I think the one thing that I do see is that being a one-man band, the quality is the first thing that goes. Generally, not all of them. Some of them maintain their quality and they're fantastic. I reckon there's probably 5 to 10% at the very pinnacle of this industry that are examples to all who look at them. And then there's the middle bit where they're sort of, they get used to messing people around and stuff and just not doing things quite as good as they should. And then there's your sex pest zone at the bottom, the shouters, the knee touchers, the people who mess people around, that kind of stuff. And it's easy to slip down that pyramid. Franchising keeps the standard up, I think. It holds you to an account. The DVSA have had a pop at that, but they're not going to take seriously the CPD stuff, are they? So, we're not really held to any kind of account apart from a standards check. And what is that check?
Sorry to interrupt. This is an interesting question that John's just posted about. Are you self-employed when on a franchise? I know a lot of talk has been going around about the Uber precedent that's been set. Personally, I don't think there's any danger of that coming into our industry, but it is, it is a very interesting development that they've had.
Well, I think in the past, I think it would be fair to say that BSM, in the old days, the bad old days, when I was a lad, used to
the trainers. Yeah.
They used to treat them like employees. They were franchised, but they treat them like employees. Because, let's face it, the franchise end of things happened because it was VAT, wasn't it? Overnight, they became, instead of being one school with 1,800 instructors, they became 1,800 instructors with one school each. So that's why it happened. It wasn't for anybody's benefit other than the school. But, the more enlightened in the industry, some of the faces all of the faces on the screen here.
And of course, with Uber, it was about the exclusivity, wasn't it? They could only work for Uber, whereas obviously our instructors can work with any pupil. They were not restricted in that regard. So I think that's where that's not going to fit, hopefully.
Yeah. But it's that was the key thing, wasn't it? With it, they used to have all sorts of restrictive practices. You had to leave your pupils behind. You couldn't work in your area for 3 months.
Yeah.
But you read the contract. you know, for training.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to I'm not going to lie about that. You know, when we drew up our franchise agreement, I asked about all of those things. You know, about you know, their right to continue the pupils. Can we restrict their areas of work? Not because we're necessarily going to do it, but I want to see the legal position. And it all comes down to that you're not really allowed to restrict their right to work. So it becomes completely unenforceable. So that's a no. Anyone who's got that in their contract really has no chance of enforcing it, really.
Although having said that, that's the European Work Directive. How does that work now?
Well, that's an interesting question.
We'll perhaps gloss over that one.
The pupils have already got that relationship, though, haven't they, James, with the instructor?
Yeah.
And, you know, these contracts, if you've got somebody tied in for a long contract, my view is if someone's actually not happy to be part of my school, they might as well leave, because they're probably not going to do the best for me or for the rest of the, you know, the instructors in the school if they're not happy. You know, there's no point saying to somebody you've got to stay for 12 months, because that could be quite damaging, couldn't it?
It can. You know, we've had situations where, you know, people have been held to contract and the reputational damage has been significant. But the other way to look at it is that, you know, we have instructors that all kind of, you know, pay into a service, and to maintain that service we need a certain number of instructors so that we can look after the other ones, you know, such as, you know, advertising, marketing, call centres, things like that. And if everybody just drops in and out as they choose, the business as a whole and the instructors within that business will suffer. So it's trying to get that balance right. You know, do you look after that one individual who wants to leave for whatever reason, or do you actually think, I'm going to look after the other instructors, you know, because at the end of the day, they want to stay in that business, they want that business to grow. So it's just trying to get that balance right. But although we have contracts in place, every instructor that, you know, does want to leave, it's very much a case-by-case basis, because there are always reasons that you might release somebody from a contract early, and possible reputation damage is certainly one of them. But it does depend on case by case.
I think if you part on good terms, they sometimes come back.
They do. Yeah, they do.
It turns out not to be greener.
or they refer other people to you.
Yes, we do get a lot of that too.
Which
yes.
I think is, you know, that isn't that how the whole industry works, word of mouth and referral. We can't get away from that. And the same's true for, you know, I've had people who we weren't right for them, but they send everybody to us when they've got a question, you know, and I'd rather live like that. You know, that's how I want to be.
If you're being fair and equitable with them, then they'll go, yeah, you know, you should deal with these people. They're all right, you know, they're good. I mean, it wasn't right for me anymore, but hey, it'll be right for you. Josh has just raised the point as well about, you know, if you turn up at a test centre in a franchised car, you know, you're lambasted. Right? You know, it's almost like a lot of people in the industry see if you're with a franchise, there must be something wrong with you, and that you should be on your own by now. But for some people, it's you know, it's not the right thing to do. You know, the franchise should be able to offer you something, and it's back to what Sean was saying at the start, isn't it? You know, if you get the balance right. And the only way you can find that out is by saying to you guys, what can we do for you? What is it you want? You know, if we were doing CPD, what would you like? You know, we're always bouncing stuff like that around. Now, this is not me saying, look how virtuous we are. But it's franchising done right is a great thing. Done badly, it's not. But it's just another one. You know, Michael from Go Roadie, hi Michael, is on about instructors doing CPD. They're thinking about having a CPD badge that they show to parents. Look, this is what our guys have done. What's your thoughts on that, boys and girls?
I wish that parents respected CPD more. The number of conversations that I've had with people where, you know, it's, you know, why do you charge more? What makes you better than others? We set ourselves up for that as better driver training, but, you know, that's fine. And, you know, that you say, well, I do X amount of CPD a year, or, you know, we're constantly trying to develop things and move things forward, hence the better tomorrow. But you know, they go, well, why? You can already drive. And they see driving on that flat level and forget the teaching bit, because they can do it themselves legally if they want to. You know, it's all about, it all comes down to that minimum standard, doesn't it? And you have to then go, it all comes down to the DVSA, who are responsible for the minimum standard. which is why, you know, I think we have to, like we are here, raise our own flags.
Yeah, just with you saying, sorry for chuckling, you're just saying that, you know, talking to parents about CPD, Mr. Hughes has just pointed out that his parents are dead, and that not all pupils are 17.
I hope that isn't new news.
Sorry. Isn't it very much about our pupils seeing the value, our customers seeing the value of what we do, which is what you're touching on. I mean, you know, an example of which, the other day my toilet broke in the downstairs. So I thought, well, do you know what I'll do? I'll replace it because I can do that. I have no experience whatsoever with plumbing. Anyway, that story ended with an inch of sewage across my whole laundry room.
Oh.
You know, and then I had to call the plumber on an emergency call out, and then he had to fit the toilet properly. I just didn't see the value in calling the plumber. I thought I can do that, and I clearly couldn't. I mean, that's where we get the problem, isn't it? You know, like you say, I can put a tube together. Surely, I can put those washers on.
How hard
I really can. So I think that's where we get the problem, is changing the perception of our industry. But that is very difficult when you know, people see the barriers to entry just as a driving license to come into the industry, and they see all these adverts where you know, you can train to be a driving instructor in 3 months and everything else. So I think we're causing our own problems, but how we change that is very, very difficult. Very difficult.
I want to touch on slightly.
Yeah,
Bob.
Fire away.
I just want to touch on slightly as well some of the hard things. I'll call them hard things, or the worries and the concerns that a franchisor naturally has. So if you're an independent instructor, and maybe not now because business is quite buoyant, but if you're an independent instructor and you have been for some time, or you're a newly independent instructor, then obviously you've got to manage your business. And that managing your business might be from anything from answering an email, listening to your voicemails, you know, it might be other bits of sales or marketing or business planning. But as a franchisor, if, for example, let's say you've got 10 instructors, then whatever the worries and stresses it is for an independent instructor, from a franchise point of view, if I've got 10 instructors, the business worry is times 10. That's 10. That's 10. It's a business. Never make a profit.
That's not the biggest issue, sure.
Oh, yeah, so soft. You know, so we're responsible, really, aren't we, in a way, for, you know, helping our franchisees to put food in their cupboards to feed their family. Yeah. So some of the pressures that we are under, which is voluntary, by the way, isn't it, to become a franchisor, but some of the pressures are quite vast, aren't they, really, if you think about running a business and trying to run a successful business and a happy ship for X amount of franchisees.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. You have to keep
franchisees are very different to employees. Very different. There's lots of different opinions, and it doesn't always necessarily fit with the direction the business perhaps wants to go in. Very different from working with employees, and a very different skill set for the franchise provider.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we've got to think about the backup plan. We've got to think about the legal issues. We've got to think about who's handling the complaints, if we get any complaints. You know, we've got to think about upskilling and investing into our franchisees. Because we all invest into our franchisees because we want to keep them upskilled and happy in the job and give them some job satisfaction.
It's it just made me think about something else, Sean. As I'm talking to you, always do better. So
thank you.
You're all running franchises. I want to take your mind back to the night before you launched your franchise. If I could take you back to that point and you knew what you know now, would you still do it?
Absolutely.
Probably not. No.
I probably wouldn't.
It's a mixed bag there. Mixed bag. It's.
Why not, Chris?
My reason is that I love the team. I love that you know, and that's always kind of been my thing anyway. The Facebook group was because I wanted to get a load of instructors in one place, and I've never really thought about what happens once I open the box, and that's always been my, what happens next. And working with Ian, that solved that problem because he was very good at that bit. I think I would probably end up, what I know now is I'd have that team around me anyway. And I'd have good people to work with, and I don't need to provide the environment for those people to be there. They will be there anyway. However, we put a lot into it, and we really do care about it. I wouldn't give it up now because we've done that. Yeah. What I've learnt is actually you don't necessarily need to have the franchise. You don't necessarily need to have that single business if you can find good people to work with. And I suppose in a way that's the progression that I'm going through now with setting up the DITC, is I'm looking to work with more good people, because not everybody, especially the really, really good ones, don't necessarily want to work for you in inverted commas or with you in under your umbrella. They want to work independently. And I think as an industry, we should embrace that more. And we should look at each individual person's strengths and what they can bring to the table, whether they're under our umbrella or not. So that's my reason for saying no. It's nothing against the franchise or doing it. I don't like hard work, but that's a separate thing. It's more that actually I think I've ascended slightly to a level at which I don't feel other people need to be under my umbrella for me to work with them equally. If they want to be, brilliant.
What are some of the issues that we face as franchisees and franchisors is to do with, and something that you chatted about, James, just before we came on, about we've taken a franchise model, it doesn't really fit what we do, and we've tried to, stick it on an anvil and batter it into shape.
It's been battered, yes.
Perhaps we need to be thinking more of being a collective autonomy. Not quite as far along as the Bog, but it's just,
I've seen, there is a rise of that to a degree. I know near me there's a group of instructors that, for obvious reason, they don't let me go into that group. They've got a WhatsApp group, and essentially what they do is they use that WhatsApp group to run that business, well, a collective, if you like. So they share pupils around, I can't cover this one, can you cover this one? In essence, it's becoming, a franchise of careers, if you like, where nobody costs anything. The issue, I guess, that they get as that grows, it'll be a bit of a leadership, and there won't be any real investment in it or direction for it. So that's where it will probably come a little bit unstuck. But when there's a group of 4, 5, 6 instructors, it does seem to be working well for them. And there's been a few variations of that. I'm not a great believer in it. I think that that might suit some instructors, and it is different from a franchise, but it's an interesting development, and I guess technology has made that easier for them.
That's it.
I think what you were saying, Chris, that you might not do it again. It's not just working with those people, it's helping those people to develop, because that's what I love to see, taking somebody from beginning trainee and getting them obviously to qualify, but then helping them to develop further is immensely satisfying as a franchisor. That could, and the continual professional development, I noticed someone said it depends on the quality of it, but it goes back to, it depends on the quality of the training in the first place. When people are perceiving an ADI, I mean, Bob said, you said some people let the standards slip, when they come out of the franchise, but that's not perceived or seen by the public, is it? It's just, I don't think we're seen yet as professionals in the way that we should be. Nobody has to have any lessons, and that's all working against us, isn't it, really, in terms of what they expect our prices to be, and do they care whether we've done anything else?
I suppose it's because they don't know. They don't know anything different. When they ring up, they just say, well, how much is it, or what's your pass rate? Because they're the only questions they can think of. They don't think to say, well, what's it going to cost me overall? Because nobody wants cheap, do they? They want good value.
Do you know my plumber came out on a call out, £89 an hour. Yeah. Yeah. And I paid it because I was up to my ankles in it.
It sounds as though he was worth every penny.
He was,
Absolutely.
honestly.
Absolutely. It's an interesting thing, and you know, that something that again, Michael from Go Road is just popped in there. There are some other benefits. I know that I've tried as much as I can in this last 12 months, which has been difficult, to keep the team gathered together and to get them to focus on their mental health and to really think about it and not do things that are going to damage it, and not to be sitting worrying about stuff, and to talk to other people. And I think franchising makes it a bit easier to do that. I see people trying to do these things on social media, but they just get kicked in the face. It's you know, social media is awful. It's not awful. It's a fantastic tool, but used badly, I mean, it can get pretty dark, can't it? Yeah. Pretty quick.
There's a lot of trolls. I find it on my groups as well. You know, sometimes people are just really horrible to one another. And then as admin, you seem to be, you know, can you control it? Well, no, not really. When there's 6,000 people in there, it makes it very difficult. And really, those people, you know, as driving instructors, it makes you really think: are they actually fit and proper people in the first place? And should they even be doing that job if that's the way they act online?
Yeah, I always like to look at it and think, it's probably a really virtuous person having a bad day. And if I need to engage with them,
they're having a lot of bad days.
Well, I tend to engage with them by a personal message, and I'm just ridiculously nice, and it seems to make them stop.
I agree. But isn't that the same? Because you're talking to them individually, they have accountability for who they are rather than being faceless. Isn't that, to bring things full circle, isn't that also what a franchise provides? When you said about people's standards, when oddly, when they're under their own banner, they don't necessarily feel, maybe that's where you see things slip. Their values are different. Yeah. But when you're representing, and you're representing colleagues who you know are going to be affected, I think often, not always, but often that can help. You know, in the same, the opposite of it's true with you get that gang mentality. There's a brilliant book, and it's available on audiobook. Anyone who knows me knows I don't do the paper stuff. It's Tribes by Seth Godin, and it beautifully explains the driving instructor community. That it's, you know, we like those groups. We like knowing where we are in those groups, and that is what franchises and driving schools offer. Yeah. We can be with like people. Really good book.
I think it gets also gets taken out of context. I mean, Josh is just making a point about, you know, on the social media stuff. There is some nasty stuff out there, but it's in the minority. If you look at all of the groups, even in the worst of the moments, the majority of the stuff that's on there is people trying to help other people, but you don't remember.
It's the vocal minority, though, isn't it? That's the problem.
It is. Yeah, I had an interaction with somebody the other day on my group. So, so you're censoring me? Yes, I am. You can't do that. Yes, I can. Well, why are you doing it? Because you're behaving like an idiot. So I want you to stop that. I'm giving you the option to stop it, or I'm going to remove you. You can't do that. Okay, ta-da then. It's just, behave.
We all need a timeout at some point, don't we?
We do, including me.
Put your members on the normal step.
Yeah, it's one of those things like my group, my rules. Sort of thing.
That's right. If you don't like it, tell you about it. And I always say, just behave like you were sat in the living room with me and I've had 8 pints. Would you say that to me? Would you really?
That's interesting. What Sean said is really interesting. Is the my group, my rules? Is that also a franchise benefit, that you know what it stands for, and therefore you can choose to be part of? And if someone's independent, they've got to make their own set of rules up. Yeah. And as anyone who has a franchise, runs a franchise, knows, it's a nightmare trying to plug all the holes to get the right rules in place for everything. You know there's going to be a situation that comes along that doesn't fit. Maybe that is an inviting prospect to have a set of rules that are laid out for you.
Well, sorry, Nikki, go ahead.
No, I was going to say also to kind of not hide behind, but to use as that front. So my instructors If someone says, oh, your prices are high or they're going up, they say, oh, well, that's all set for me. This, whatever it is, they've got that backup, haven't they, really?
Yeah.
So they're not having to say that those are their decisions. They can say, oh, well, it's not me. Nikki says that. So, that's why we do it.
But it's a great point that you made earlier, Chris, about, about standards and stuff, but is that not what the DVSA tried to do? Have a standardized set of, look, these people are having this CPD and they're doing, and if it's voluntary, a lot of people will just go, nah, don't fancy it. But I don't know, it's an age-old problem, isn't it?
If they're there for minimum standards, we need to be there for the maximum standards, otherwise no one will be. I say we as the whole community, everybody needs to be stepping up and saying this is where my line is, because I wish that I could feel confident in saying, and I'm not sure I can, that nobody wants to be at that bottom minimum level. I think sadly we find some that are, but often they just need educating.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They've been misled.
I don't think it's a choice to make. They just kind of end up there because it's just easy.
So what about the obvious reason about earning potential? I think from my experience, I think that earning potential in the majority of the cases, or certainly 2/3 of the cases, is better when you're within a franchise, because the work levels are more consistent, and you don't get those same peaks and troughs. I always say, I see independents and they leave on a full diary, but it only takes a small change in circumstances, I don't know, college closing down for holidays or something, and that downward spiral happens and the recommendations start drying up, and then before you know it, you've got less recommendations to recommend you, and you end up with an empty diary. Whereas obviously, being part of an established franchise, you've got that consistent level of work that should be coming in. I know you get the peaks, because I know that some instructors charge an awful lot when they're independent, but there is certainly a very big nucleus there where I think there's more earning potential in the franchise. I just wondered how you all feel about that.
I think we've certainly got more advertising clout. I don't know, because as you quite rightly say, there's some independents who are charging good money.
Is that because they're franchises, or is that because they're successful and they've gone the course, and that they have enough different lines in the water that if one dries up, the other one doesn't, and it's very difficult to do that. So if you are short-term successful and then you hit a change, it's difficult to adapt if you haven't already got those in place.
Yeah.
Whereas the bigger umbrella, the more more diversity you can have, and you can access more communities. And actually, do you know, if my local church is my stomping ground, I get all my pupils from there. Why would I bother elsewhere? It's fine until it shuts down, or a national pandemic comes along and no one's predicted it. But something happens to change that. How do you then go into another area where there's already an instructor in place? Whereas with a franchise, you can have multiple sources working together. So I think success can come in lots of different ways. I agree. I think often if you find a successful franchise, that will have that in place. I'm sure Sean would say the same about any business.
I think that's the way that's the way that I describe it to our guys. It's you'll hit peaks and troughs all the way through your career. The franchise is really there to smooth all of those out, to keep you on a steady income level, not necessarily high or low, but steady, so it's dependable. But Sean, you're the marketing guru. What's your take on that?
I'm on. I forgot I was going to say now, Bob. Yeah, exactly what you guys are saying, really, especially Chris and James as well. There, I think everyone's, Bob and Nikki, such valid points there with the benefits about a franchise. And about the peaks and troughs. One thing that a franchise is naturally good at, without putting really any effort in, is brand awareness. Because with brand awareness, we're out there. I might have 10 cars in my local town. So the public 10 times more likely to see my driving skill or my brand. So when there's a trough in the market, you know, we're already there at the forefront of that person's mind. So we've got that as a backup from a marketing point of view, is the brand awareness.
Yeah, yeah.
What is hard from a franchisor point of view is breaking out into a new town, for example, because that takes a lot of marketing to break out into a new town. I might train somebody up to become a driving instructor, and they might live 25 miles away. And it takes a lot of effort to maybe fill that instructor's diary when I have no presence in that town.
Yeah.
I've got to invest a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort in order to make sure that instructor can get work and put food on their table. So from a marketing point of view, yeah, but peaks and troughs, again, if you have that brand awareness, it's consistent, then it does have a slight advantage over an independent, probably because we're being seen 10 times multiple amounts.
Yeah,
it's budgets as well, isn't it? You know, marketing budgets. You know, if we get a new instructor, we can chuck money at it to make them successful. Whereas the individual, there's no way that they can compete with that. You know, so when times are harder, you know, they can choose where they advertise, whereas we can advertise in multiple different locations at the same time. And when you're scraping around for work, that's kind of what you need really at the end of the day. I mean, I agree with you. I think for the next couple of years, I think there's going to be, you know, potentially enough pupils around, but after that, there's a big danger that we could end up falling off a cliff, and it might be shorter than 2 years. It may well be shorter.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the watchword at the minute, isn't it? No matter whether you're with a franchise or you're independent, don't allow this time of plenty to put you in a position where you're going to struggle when the work starts to drift away. The time to do your marketing and to work on your ethics is when you haven't got time to do it.
Yeah,
reality, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, for talking about the time and effort and costs, you know, from a franchisor point of view, trying to get a break into a new town, it is difficult, you know, because you've got to use multiple channels. So, for example, I would use Google Ads, for example. And I already mentioned earlier on that Google Ads at the moment is saturated with BSM and AA, Red, and a few others. So if they're paying more, you know, pay per click than me, my ads are never going to get seen. But there is a special way of getting around that. If you study Google Ads, then
you'll have to talk to us about that. Our biggest cost per click has been £12.
Has it? Yeah. Probably half that for you, James. But that's a different story altogether. You know, we're going off onto a different tangent at the moment. In a minute, you know, that's all about expanding, isn't it? But if we keep it franchise orientated, you know, the franchise has always got your back.
Yeah. When you know what hits the fan, as it has.
And you know, we've got the experience, haven't we? Most of us have been in the business a long time, and we've seen the peaks and troughs. We've learned a lot about the industry, so we are there to offer good advice and support when they need it. In particular times like now, you know, when we do need to all pull together and help each other.
And doesn't the industry do that well? Just to, you know, to big up the industry for a second.
I think generally they do.
It's the thing that I am so proud of and respect, that even some of the trolls, you know, the names that you'll see on Facebook really putting the knife in. When something actually happens, you'll often find some of those people that you've butted heads with. They're not necessarily the trolls, but the ones that you've disagreed with on regular occasions. I've got a list. I keep it very private.
I think we all have.
But they're the ones that you'll suddenly get a call from out of the blue, and they'll go, "Oh, I saw this happen," or you know, I remember when he's now 10, he's sat next to me. But when the first son came along, and the number of instructors that I didn't know got in touch and said, you know, do you need tests covered, or do you need any help? And you know, things happen. The industry is really good at that. Nationally, you know, it can be someone from Scotland phoning you and saying, you know, I saw this happen, or just a message, and you know, I often use the phrase "united by a badge." There is this.
Do you think Facebook's the reason for that. It's brought us together. You know, we can do things like this now.
It's made the world smaller, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sure. Definitely. And what I don't know, I wasn't about, because literally, I set up the first Facebook group for driving instructors when it was a PDI.
Yeah.
So I don't know the world before Facebook, which is
We
a
used to
really
talk.
weird concept.
In the test centre, we used to talk to each other.
Quite a genteel place.
You could go into the test centre waiting room.
That's true. Yeah, and we didn't have phones. We talked.
Well,
for me, that's an issue.
You avoid these people. You just didn't go for a cup of coffee with them at test centre time. You avoid people. Now you can't. You've got to share that space with them. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we've, the original question was, franchise is the work of Satan or your friend in the business. I think from our conversations here, I think we can see that it can be both. So read the contract is the watchword. And just because somebody's on a franchise doesn't make them a poor instructor. There's exceptional instructors. We've got some phenomenal people, and I know you guys have too.
Yeah. So I've got, sorry, Bob. One of my franchisees, ex-banker. Magnificent with numbers, magnificent with business. He runs rings around me in every single aspect of business. He's happy to be, on the franchise.
Yeah. You don't want that responsibility anymore. Yeah, you do. You take care of that. I'll just get on with the stuff I enjoy.
Yeah. But it's at the end of the day, it is all down to communication. It's about relationships, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you can communicate with your franchisees, your fellow colleagues, whatever they are, then things can be resolved, can't they?
Yeah. Every franchisee has a voice, and every franchisee matters.
They should. They should. I don't think everyone does. I think in some schools they're just numbers, Sean. They're not actually valued for the person that they are.
Absolutely, they're just names on a contract, Nicky, aren't they? Really, at the end of the day, unfortunately, and we'd love to change that.
And I think it probably naturally will because of social media, and because of this latest little issues, with franchising, people are focused on it now, and it's. The good guys will rise to the surface, and they'll have to change. They'll have to. Otherwise, they'll lose.
Do you think this is going to have any impact on AA's business, though? To be honest, I mean, I personally think it will be less yesterday's news before we know it. There'll be new people coming through, and it will be forgotten.
Possibly.
Yeah, they're already queued up, James.
I'm not really.
They're already queued up.
That is the case. Let me point out Red to you. Look at what they were doing when they were the instructor college, and people started to hold them to account, so they had to change. It was that simple. Otherwise, they'd have gone under.
Well, they did technically, didn't they?
Well, they did, but it was the same people the next day.
Yeah.
But they learned from it. They were smart, and they learned. They learned that we're not going to be able to continue this. This is crazy. And we've done that as we've gone on. We've adapted our offering to be more what our guys and gals need and want. But that's because we talk to them all the time. So you don't have to be a small franchise to get it right. But you've got to work hard at it. It's constant work. We want to just be a group of people who believe in quality. That's the theory anyway. Well, that's been interesting. We've probably exhausted it for now, but I'm sure we'll come back and revisit this. It'd be interesting, just, let us have your comments. Drop them in there. When I've recorded this, so I'll output the thing. And we can then, share the thing around. Everybody's got groups. I'll output the video and you guys can have it for your groups. Joss is just saying the final thing there that, people can't disagree. The problem is the algorithm that runs social media feeds you what it knows you're going to agree with, because it knows who you are and where you shop and what you think and what your political views are because of where you visit. So it feeds you this diet of stuff that agrees with you. And then when somebody says something that disagrees, look at Brexit, look at the American election. When you're suddenly faced with a contrary view, you suddenly rail against it and go, you're the Antichrist. It's, it came close to civil war in America. That's social media. But, we all need to be a little bit smarter. People don't want to behave that way. They're just led into it. And it just social media seems to enable it. We need stronger admin. Oh no, hang on. That's me. And you, and you, and you. Thank you all for your time. It's been fascinating.
You're welcome.
I've properly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I hope that you boys and girls out there in Facebook driving instructor land have got something from it too. Do feel free to feedback and comment and let us know what you think. When I do the video afterwards, I'll maybe see if I can organise to let everybody know how to contact everybody who's on screen. Or would we all be okay with that?
Yeah.
I might be biting off more than I can chew here, mate. But I'll attempt to do it. But in the meantime,
if we're doing our job properly, you should be able to find us on Google.
But if we can't, I'll blame Sean. Well, for now, boys and girls, I'll bring back to you.
Have a nice weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
So there we are. So don't put your finger up your nose and don't swear. Especially in that order. So it tells us that we're streaming live, but I can't see it yet. So we'll wait until somebody says, yes, I can see you. And then we know that we are...
I can see you, Bob.
Can you? Oh, right. Behave yourself. Oh, there we go. And we are indeed live. I'll need to expand that and then hit this, stop the sound. There we go. So we're live on Facebook. We'll wait for somebody to just pop in and say hello, and then we know that it is actually live and not just a figment of my imagination. Yes, excellent. We have some people there. So good afternoon all. Good afternoon, collected panel here. I'm sure everybody knows who everybody on here is, hopefully. But just in case, if I go around in the order that you're shown on my screen, which is actually different to the order it's shown on there, but let's go ladies first. Nikki, tell everybody who you are.
I'm Nikki Harris, and I'm an instructor trainer and run a multi-car driving school in Yorkshire.
Splendid. James, you're next on my screen.
Oh, well, I'm not on my screen, but I'm James Conley. I run a franchise business across the UK, and we also do some driving instructor training. I've been in driving instructor now for about 15 years, so quite a time now for me.
Excellent. Chris, you're next on mine.
Chris Lenstead. I run Facebook groups, driving instructors. I've got my own driving school and franchisees, and recently founded the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective.
Splendid. Mr. Harrington Lunt.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Sean Harrington Lunt, based in Andover, Hampshire, and I run a multi-car school and an audit training registered company in the Southwest.
My name is Bob Morton, Director of Training at the Learner Driving Centres, one of the UK's larger driving schools. Retiring this year. Oh, how old am I? So, welcome to everybody and hello to everybody who's watching.